Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's top 10 episodes of Stargate Universe. In this video, I'll be counting down my top 10 favorite episodes from one of my favorite TV shows, Stargate Universe. So I'll have to give a spoiler warning for Stargate Universe. If you haven't seen all of Stargate Universe, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So before I get into my top 10 favorite episodes, let me start off by counting down my bottom 5 least favorite episodes of Stargate Universe, the episodes I didn't feel quite worked, starting with my number 5, Pain. This was the episode in which, due to an infestation of some alien ticks, the crew began hallucinating their biggest fears. This was one of the most unoriginal episodes of the series, as this episode felt like a dozen others that I've seen on other shows such as Star Trek Voyager and others, and in addition, the plot of this episode was pretty dull and predictable. Number 4 is Human. Is an incredibly dull episode where Dr. Rush sits in the command chair and hallucinates his past where his wife is dying, which was a very clunky and contrived way to disseminate his backstory, which gave us some insights into his character, but the way it was executed, trying to tie into the current storyline, was very poorly done. And we also get a mediocre B story about Scott and the others being trapped in an underground cabin, which was rather tedious as well. Number 3 is Lost, which continues the storyline from Human, where Scott and the others are trapped in the cave, and Destiny moves on, leaving them stranded on the planet with no way back. This episode tries to and fails to create suspense, and the payoff to this happens so easily. It was very anticlimactic and unsatisfying. Number 2 is The Hunt, where TJ and a random crew member are taken captive by a strange alien lion-like animal, and Scott leads a hunting party with Varro, where the majority of it either gets killed or injured, leaving only Greer and Varro behind to work through their differences as they try to rescue TJ. This was one of the more silly episodes of the series. In addition to being cliched, one thing that really bothered me about this episode was how they used it as an excuse to simply kill off all the remaining Aleutian Alliance members, conveniently leaving only Varro alive, which he didn't really seem to care much about. It just felt so contrived. In addition, the ending where they discovered the animal was intelligent was just plain silly. And my number 1 least favorite episode of Stargate Universe by far is Cloverdale. This isn't even close. In fact, this episode is way below the others as being the far worst. As the other episodes on this list, I would give like a 4 or a 5 out of 10, whereas this episode gets a 2 out of 10 and is by far the worst. It was such a stupid episode about Scott getting poisoning and dying from an alien attack, and for reasons that were never explained, he hallucinates this alternate reality where he's in a small town called Cloverdale, about to marry Chloe, and all the main characters are there playing various roles in this fantasy. I'm sorry, but not only was this unoriginal, it was really fucking stupid, as well as being boring. This was what I would say the only truly terrible episode of the entire series, making it my number 1 least favorite episode of Stargate Universe. So that's enough negativity. Let's now just get into something more positive about this amazing show. But before I get into my top 10, let me start off by naming a few honorable mentions that didn't quite make my top 10, but were still amazing episodes worth mentioning, starting with Earth, where we learn about Eli, Chloe, and Colonel Young as they return to Earth via the communication stones and attempt to contact with loved ones, as Colonel Telford, using the stones, tries to take control of Destiny in an attempt to enact a very dangerous plan to get them home. Next honorable mention is Air, the 3-part premiere of Stargate Universe that tells the story of the crew getting stranded on Destiny and learning of their new surroundings, as well as the power struggle that ensues as they struggle for supplies in order to survive. And final honorable mention is Incursion, the two-part finale of Season 1, where the Lucian Alliance found their way to Gate to Destiny in attempts to take over the ship, leading to an exciting standoff where each party holds part of the ship. So now let me jump into my top 10 favorite episodes of Stargate Universe, starting with my number 10, Alliances. This is the episode in which Greer and Camille switch bodies via the stones with a high-ranking senator and a lead scientist who go aboard Destiny to evaluate the crew. Meanwhile, while on Earth, they suffer an attack from the Lucian Alliance where the bodies that Greer and Camille inhabit get a lethal dose of radiation, and they struggle to disarm a bomb before it destroys all of Washington, D.C. This was a really intense episode where we see the main focus for once be put on Greer and Camille as she helps him to overcome his demons in order to solve their current crisis. Plus, it asks really hard moral questions when the head scientist realizes that his body is dying and he refuses to go back to Earth. It was just really intense. Number 9 is Hope, where they lost contact with Earth and tried to make contact with them again through the stones, but instead made contact with Gin and Amanda, who died while connected to each other via the stones. But apparently their consciousness survived in the stones and both inhabit Chloe's body. This was a richly emotional episode that explores the weird science fiction device of the communication stones and uses it to tell a real emotional story of what it would be like to reconnect with loved ones that you thought were dead. It was really emotional and really effective. Number 8 is Justice, where an airman commits suicide, but Colonel Young is framed for his murder, and Camille uses this as an excuse to try to take command of Destiny. But when Young finds out it was Rush that framed him, he leaves him stranded on a planet to die. This was a really intense episode, not for being a typical trial episode, as they actually took it far beyond that simple premise to make it more about the power struggle on the ship and how things come to an head, and it was absolutely intense the way they played it out. Number 7 is Divided. I always love mutiny episodes where a crew is split in half as factions form to try and change the command structure. And this one, delivered in spades, as after Young exiled Rush from the ship and after his return, the civilian population on board no longer trusts the military command and attempts to take the ship by force, with Camille and Rush behind it and some unexpected help from Chloe. So the tension of the power structure, more specifically between Young and Rush, has been building all season, and it was so awesome seeing this tension finally explode, pitting friends against friends, and as the power structure of the ship completely comes apart. Number 6 is The Greater Good, as Rush and Young get stuck on a ship with no way to return because the crew has no control over Destiny's systems, but in fact, Rush has had control over those systems for quite some time, but he has been keeping it secret from the crew. So he brings Amanda aboard via the stones so she can keep his secret, but she fails and the secret gets out and the crew explodes with anger that Rush was lying to them this whole time. However, a Lucian Alliance agent kills Amanda, who is using Gen's body, in order to prevent Gen from giving Stargate Command any intelligence about the Lucian Alliance, which was such a super intense and tragic ending. This was a truly exciting and dynamic episode. Number 5 is Intervention, the conclusion to the 2 parts season finale of Season 1, where the Lucian Alliance and the ship are backed into a corner, so they threaten to kill everyone on board, which leads to some of their own members turning on them, and they allow Young and his crew to retake the ship. This was such an amazing, intense episode, particularly the standoff with Rush and the Lucian Alliance, where he is willing to kill everyone on the ship rather than let the Lucian Alliance have it. It was so suspenseful, it had me on the edge of my seat the whole time. Number 4 is Gauntlet, the Season 2 finale, which very unfortunately ended up being the series finale, in which this episode They find themselves surrounded by these alien drones that cut off all their avenues of refueling and resupplying, so they may be doomed to die without supplies. So they come up with a plan to go into hibernation pods until the ship has left the galaxy and those drones behind. However, the stasis pods get damaged and there's one missing one, meaning one person has to volunteer to stay awake, and Eli volunteers to do so. This was a very great finale, despite the fact that when it was first written, they didn't realize it would be the final episode of the entire show. But when they did, they added a few nice touches which worked very well, as you really got the sense that this crew, which had been struggling with infighting this whole time, come together to appreciate what they have. And that toast that Young gives over dinner, where he acknowledges them as a family, was really touching. More so than most other Starship shows, because this was actually a huge accomplishment for them, since they've been struggling and fighting with each other all this time. For them to come and admit that they were a family, it was a really nice feeling of finality to it. Number 3 is Twin Destinies, an extremely fascinating episode where Destiny goes to a star to enact Eli's plan to gate back to Earth, and are greeted by a future version of Dr. Rush that tells them they did attempt Eli's plan and everyone died. This was a super intense episode and one of the best examples where the show combines weird sci-fi phenomenon with the great character-based stories that this show was best at, as well as strange mystery and suspense to tell a great time travel story that was pulled off really well. Number 2 is Malice. Such a powerful episode that showed the aftermath of Gin and Amanda's death, where the Lucian Alliance member Simeon that killed them escapes to the planet after killing and taking several people hostage, and Rush goes on a revenge-driven mission to kill him. This episode was so emotionally powerful and amazingly suspense at the same time, as we got the very emotional, very heartbreaking story of both Eli and Rush having to deal with losing the ones that they love, where Scott and Greer try to look out for them on the hunt and just hunt for Simeon objectively. However, Simeon is able to outsmart them at every turn, which made the conclusion when Rush used his smarts to outsmart Simeon by trapping him in an alien animal stampede and then mercilessly killing him was just so powerful and so dynamic, as it takes Rush to a very dark place. It was just an amazing episode. And my number 1 favorite episode of Stargate Universe is Time. In this episode, Destiny gates to a planet for supplies, and there they find a keynote with the recording of them arriving on this planet, which makes no sense to them, as they'd never been to this planet before. But they watch the recording, and in it, they see themselves being killed off by these vicious alien creatures and by a fatal virus that starts to kill them. They soon learn that the Kino was from the future, and as they now know to avoid the planet with the vicious alien creatures that only come out at night, they still begin to die off by the virus, which they learn they had already contracted through contaminated water, and that the venom from the alien creatures holds the key to the cure for this virus. But they're running out of time, and it's night on the planet, and they can't wait until day because they'll all be dead. So they try to get the creatures, the venom of the creatures, but they all die as the creatures are just killed them all off. So Scott manages to send another Kino back in time to warn them exactly what was going on so that they can extract the venom from the alien creatures during the day when it is dormant and safe to do so. This episode was so intense. To say this episode had me on the edge of my seat the whole time is a bit of an understatement. In addition, this episode was just so creepy, so eerie. I find it immensely more scary than most horror movies. I mean, when the characters were watching the footage of themselves being ripped apart by these vicious alien things, that was just so creepy. And the creepy alien thingies themselves were scary as fuck. Sure, it's kind of an Aliens ripoff, but let's be honest, there's been tons of movies and shows that have alien ripoffs. And as far as alien ripoffs go, this one was pretty damn scary. And on top of that, they threw in a time travel element, and that's the surest way to get to my heart. And this was an awesome use of time travel as well. I mean, in that footage where Rush quotes Butch and the Sundance Kid right before going through the gate, and eventually we learned that he was going back in time where they found his skeleton. That was awesome. This whole episode had an eerie sense of foreboding that I've rarely seen on any screen, and I'm telling you, this episode was scarier than 90% of the horror movies that I've seen. And it was a great character story, great sci-fi story, and just amazing episode all around, making it my #1 favorite episode of Stargate Universe. So that's it for my top 10 best episodes of Stargate Universe. Be sure to check back here next week as I do my full review of Stargate Universe, which I will put a link to in the description below once that's up. Also, be sure to check out my channel for many more videos on shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, Mr. Robot, Dark Matter, and more, as well as more episode top 10s to come, so make sure you subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.